The sun had barely risen when Kathleen stood by the kitchen sink, staring out the window as the coffee pot hissed behind her. She wasn't really seeing the yard or the dew on the grass. She was watching the same thought loop in her head like a scratched record. Toughen up or leave. His voice still echoed from last night, sharp and final. Douglas hadn't yelled. He didn't need to. The cold in his tone cut deeper than any raised voice ever could. She had been holding it in for months, brushing off the little things, the way he dismissed her ideas when they planned things, the way his eyes barely lifted from his phone when she tried to talk about her day, how he rolled his eyes when she cried during arguments. Kathleen had learned to compress her feelings, make them smaller, manageable, until they weren't. Last night, all she'd done was ask why he hadn't come to the dinner with her parents. He'd said he forgot, but his tone made it clear it wasn't important enough to remember. When she asked how he could just blow it off like that, he leaned against the door frame, crossed his arms, and gave her that look, the one that made her feel small, like she was being dramatic again. I've got enough on my plate without babysitting. Your emotions, Kathleen. Toughen up or leave. And just like that, he walked out the room. No apology, no regret. Now she stood in the same house where love once echoed from the walls, and it felt like a stranger's home. The silence between them had grown roots, creeping into every corner of their relationship. Douglas used to pull her in at night, whispering how lucky he was to have her. Now he rolled away, and she counted the distance in inches. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the bitterness fitting the taste in her mouth. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the mug. It wasn't just about one fight. It was the slow burn of being undervalued, of shrinking a little more every day just to keep the peace. He didn't see it, or worse, he did and just didn't care. The stairs creaked behind her. Douglas was up. "Coffee?" she asked, voice flat. "Yeah," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "Thanks." She poured him a cup and slid it across the counter. Their fingers didn't touch. They hadn't in a while. He took a sip and nodded toward her, still not looking. "About last night," Kathleen waited. "I just think sometimes you take things too personally. Not everything is about how you feel. I'm dealing with pressure, too, you know." There it was. The justification. The subtle invalidation wrapped in calm words. She nodded, though she didn't agree. She'd heard this song before. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm just tired." Douglas looked up at that. For a second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern. Guilt. She wasn't sure, but it passed just as quickly. "Then maybe take some time for yourself. Get away for a bit." "Get away," she echoed. "Like a break?" "Yeah, maybe. Might help you get your head on straight." That was it. The final push. Kathleen set her cup down and walked to the hallway. She didn't yell or cry. She didn't slam doors. She moved like a woman who had already made peace with a decision. By noon, her suitcase was packed. Douglas had gone out, said he had a meeting. He hadn't asked why she was packing. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he didn't believe she would actually leave. She left the house key on the kitchen counter, right beside his untouched coffee cup, now gone cold. The silence she carried wasn't weakness. It was power. It was her answer to his ultimatum. She pulled out of the driveway, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds. She didn't look back, but she didn't cry either. Not yet. The motel wasn't glamorous. Nothing more than peeling walls and a stiff mattress. But it was hers for now. Kathleen sat on the edge of the bed, her phone resting in her lap like a weight. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not Barbara, not even her mother. She needed to let it breathe first. Let it become real before the questions and judgments came rolling in. The room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and loneliness. The television played softly in the background, but she wasn't watching. She stared at the phone screen, at a text, half-typed, to Barbara. I left him. Simple, raw, final. But she backspaced every letter. It was too soon, too cold. Instead, she tossed the phone aside and laid back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She wondered what Douglas was doing right now, if he even noticed she was gone yet. If he'd opened the fridge and realized she didn't stock it like she usually did. If he'd noticed the silence in the house and not find it peaceful anymore. By evening, she finally grabbed her purse and walked to the diner across the street. It was one of those all-night places that served everything under fluorescent lights and made you feel like time didn't exist there. She slid into a booth and ordered a grilled cheese and black coffee. Rough day, the waitress asked, scribbling her order. Kathleen smiled weakly. Something like that. You look like you just walked away from something heavy. Kathleen blinked at her. The woman couldn't have been more than 35, with tired eyes and a warmth that felt too kind for the day Kathleen had. She nodded. I did. Good for you, the waitress said without hesitation. Most people stay too long and forget how to breathe. Those words stuck with her. She turned them over in her mind as she sipped the bitter coffee. Forget how to breathe. Maybe that's exactly what had happened to her. Somewhere along the way, Kathleen had traded her voice for peace, her smile for stability. But peace without respect wasn't peace. It was submission, and she'd had enough of that. Halfway through her sandwich, her phone buzzed. A message from Douglas. Where are you? She didn't answer right away. She read the words again and again. Not, are you okay? Not, please come back. Just, where are you? Like he'd misplaced something. Then another message followed. You didn't have to overreact like this. There it was. His way of twisting the knife, without even touching her. Overreact. As if months of emotional isolation boiled down to one impulsive tantrum. She locked the phone and shoved it back into her purse. The waitress brought the check, and Kathleen gave her a generous tip before stepping out into the cool night. She stood on the sidewalk for a while, looking up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, there was no noise, no tension waiting to pounce behind every word, just stillness. Back in her room, she finally called Barbara. Hey, came Barbara's voice on the other end. What's up? Kathleen exhaled. I left him. A pause. Oh, wow. Are you okay? No, Kathleen said honestly. But I will be. Barbara didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She'd seen the way Douglas treated her, always with that mild indifference that wore Kathleen down piece by piece. Do you want me to come get you? Barbara asked gently. No, I just need a couple of days to think, to figure things out. Barbara paused again. Just promise me you won't talk yourself into going back just because it's familiar. Kathleen smiled softly. I won't. They talked for another 15 minutes, mostly Barbara, filling the space with soft chatter, giving Kathleen something else to hold on to. When the call ended, she felt a little less alone. She didn't know what came next. The job, the apartment, the next step, they were all question marks. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel stuck, and maybe that was enough for now. The next morning came slow and quiet. The light creeping through the cheap blinds landed in stripes across Kathleen's face. And for a second, she forgot where she was. The hum of traffic outside replaced the usual birdsong from her and Douglas's backyard. The air was cooler, untouched by his scent, his presence, his shadow. She sat up slowly, her body aching more from stress than sleep. Her mind had barely shut down through the night. She kept replaying conversations, Not just from last night, but from the last year. All the little moments where she should have stood her ground but didn't. All the times she swallowed her voice. Just to keep Douglas from shutting down or walking away, Kathleen scrolled through her phone. Another message from him. Short, sharp, and unreadable. I'm not going to chase you. If this is what you want, fine. Not a single word of apology. Not a hint of softness. Just ego and pride. She tossed the phone onto the bed and stood up. Today, she needed to start doing something, even if it was small. Something to remind herself that she wasn't some shadow of a woman built around someone else's moods. Her first stop was a nearby salon. She didn't plan on going, but as she walked past and caught her reflection in the glass, something stopped her. Her hair had always been the same, long, well kept, the way Douglas liked it. He used to say he loved running his hands through it, and she'd kept it that way, like some kind of silent offering. She stepped inside and asked for a cut, short, blunt, new. The stylist hesitated. You sure, honey? Kathleen just nodded. I'm done holding on to things that don't belong to me anymore. The scissors sliced through her hair like it was nothing. With each snip, she felt a little lighter, a little freer. When the mirror showed her the final result, she barely recognized herself, and she liked that. Afterward, she wandered into a thrift store. She didn't need anything, but there was something comforting about looking through old things that had stories of their own. She picked up a second-hand leather journal, its cover worn and soft from use. Kathleen used to write, back before Douglas made her feel silly for it. You and your little poems, he'd once said with a smirk. You should focus on something useful. Now she was going to write again, not for anyone else, just for her. She sat at a small cafe and opened the journal to a blank page. I was quiet for so long, I forgot what my voice sounded like. Now that I've heard it again, I won't go back to silence. She paused. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, she got a call from Mac, Douglas's best friend. And once, upon a time, someone who had looked at Kathleen like he saw right through the performance she'd been forced to put on. He was always decent to her, even when Douglas wasn't. Hey, I heard, he said, his voice cautious. From who? She asked. Douglas. He didn't say much. Just said you left. Sounded pissed. Kathleen closed her eyes. Of course, he's pissed. He lost control. There was silence on the other end for a moment. I'm not calling to pick sides, Max said finally. I always thought you deserved better than how he treated you. I guess I didn't know how to say it. That hit her harder than she expected. Thank you. Look, if you need anything, even just someone to vent to, I'm around. She didn't know how to respond to that. There was a warmth in his tone that Douglas hadn't given her in months, maybe years. I'll keep that in mind, she said. They hung up, and Kathleen just sat there for a long time. The silence of the room was different tonight. It didn't feel like something caving in on her. It felt like space. Space to think, to feel, to breathe. For the first time in a long while, Kathleen didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. 2 days turned into 3, 3 into 5. Kathleen didn't count them on purpose, but the stretch of time away from Douglas began to feel like recovery from an illness she hadn't realized she'd caught. Her skin didn't itch the way it used to when she waited for him to come home. Her chest didn't tighten at the thought of what mood he might be in. And for once, she didn't have to explain her own feelings, just to justify existing. She found a temporary job at a little bookstore near the motel. The owner, a kind older woman named Helen, didn't ask for a resume. She just looked at Kathleen's tired eyes and said, "Come in tomorrow at 9. Wear comfortable shoes." That was it. Organizing dusty shelves, and helping quiet strangers find. Books was a kind of therapy. It didn't pay much, but Kathleen didn't care. She wasn't trying to get rich. She was trying to get real. The bookstore smelled like pages and old dreams, and that was enough. Barbara came to visit on day 6. She brought snacks, gossip, and an armful of clothes from Kathleen's apartment. Before Douglas could box them up in anger, they sat on the motel bed eating chips and drinking lukewarm soda, their knees touching like they used to when they were girls whispering secrets in the dark. "So," Barbara said carefully, "I take it he's still not exactly begging you to come home?" Kathleen shook her head. "He sent a few texts, but they're not really about me, just about control. He doesn't miss me. He misses having someone around to put up with him." Barbara leaned back against the headboard. "God, I never liked him." Kathleen laughed quietly. "I know. You hit it well, though. I was trying to be supportive, but he was always sharp, like everything was your fault, even when it clearly wasn't." Kathleen looked down at her hands. "It's strange. I keep waiting to feel guilty, like maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed and tried harder. But every time I picture going back, it feels like suffocating." Barbara nodded. "That's because you finally got air. Doesn't mean you don't love him. Just means you started loving yourself too." That night, after Barbara left, Kathleen sat by the window. Cars passed. A couple argued. Somewhere in the parking lot, a dog barked in the distance. Then her phone rang. Douglas. She stared at the screen for a long time, but curiosity got the better of her. She answered. "Hey," he said, casual like nothing had happened. "You've been gone a while." She stayed quiet. "I guess I thought you'd cool down and come back by now." "I didn't leave because I needed to cool down, Douglas." There was a pause. Then his voice turned colder. "So what? You're just done. Throw away years over a stupid fight?" Kathleen laughed softly, bitter. "It wasn't about the fight. You made it clear I wasn't allowed to feel hurt, that my emotions were inconvenient." "You're being dramatic," she sighed. "There it is. That's why I left. You don't hear me. You've never heard me. And now it's too late. You think you're some martyr now?" he snapped. "Living in a motel, working at some bookstore, like it's a damn movie. I think I'm finally not miserable every single day," she said, voice steady. Douglas went silent. When he spoke again, he was quieter. "You don't have to do this. We can talk. I can change. You've said that before," she said. "And I stayed, and nothing changed. I'm done staying for promises that never become real." He didn't say anything else. The call ended. She looked out the window again, but this time there was no weight on her chest, just a stillness, a clean, unfamiliar kind of peace. It wasn't over yet. There were still decisions to make, steps to take, but she wasn't afraid anymore. It rained the next morning, and Kathleen didn't mind. She walked to the bookstore with her hoodie up, the cold drops soaking her sleeves, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. The kind of rain that used to make her cancel plans now felt like background noise, gentle, honest, and unbothered by who liked it or not. Helen gave her a warm smile as she walked in, handing her a towel. "You look like you walked through a car wash." Kathleen chuckled, taking the towel and drying. Her hair felt kind of good, to be honest. The day moved slow. A few customers trickled in, most of them older folks who came in for puzzles or dog-eared mystery novels. A little boy came in with his grandmother and stared at a shelf full of dinosaurs for almost 20 minutes before picking one. Kathleen wrapped it in brown paper and gave him a sticker with it, just because. The boy grinned like she'd given him gold. Sometime after lunch, the door opened and she looked up, expecting another customer. It was Mac. He stood just inside the door, his jacket wet, his eyes searching. Kathleen blinked, surprised. How did you? Barbara, he said, stepping in slowly. I kind of pushed her for it. Kathleen wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out from behind the counter. Did Douglas send you? Mac shook his head. No, I haven't even talked to him since that call he made the night you left. She studied his face for a moment. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept right either, but there was something gentler in his eyes, something she hadn't expected. I'm not here to convince you to go back, he said. I thought maybe you could use a friend. She hesitated, then nodded toward the reading nook by the window. All right. You want some tea? I make a killer cup of cheap chamomile. They sat there for a while, hot tea in hand, watching the rain smear down the glass. You look different, Max said finally. Kathleen raised an eyebrow. Short hair does that. No, he said softly. You look like yourself again, or maybe someone new, but not worn down like before. Her throat tightened a little, but she didn't look away. I didn't realize how much of me I gave up, bit by bit. You don't notice it at first. You just think, okay, I'll let that slide. Or maybe it's my fault. And then one day, you wake up and you can't recognize the person in your own mirror. Mac nodded slowly. I saw it happening. I wanted to say something, but I didn't think it was my place. Kathleen sipped her tea. It wasn't your job to save me. I had to do that part myself. I still should have said something, he said, almost to himself. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she turned to him. So, why did you really come? He looked at her then, right in the eyes. Because I cared. Because I do care. And seeing you like this, finally breathing, I just wanted to be part of that somehow. Even if it's just sitting here and drinking terrible tea in the rain. A soft laugh escaped her, and something eased between them. It wasn't romance, not yet, not even close, but it was warmth, safety, recognition, things she hadn't felt in a long time. When Mac finally stood to leave, he hesitated. If you ever want to talk or grab dinner just as friends, I'd be around. No pressure. Kathleen smiled. That'd be nice. He nodded and stepped back into the rain, and she watched him go, his figure disappearing into the grey. For the first time, the world felt open. She was starting over, but not as someone lost, as someone finally found. 2 weeks passed. The motel room, once a temporary cocoon, had started to feel more like a resting point than a hiding place. Kathleen had settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the bookstore, afternoons spent journaling at the cafe, and evenings walking the streets with no destination, just breathing in her own space. Her silence was no longer out of fear or exhaustion. It was chosen, calm, necessary. Douglas hadn't called again. He hadn't shown up, hadn't tried. Part of her used to hope he would. That he'd show up soaked in rain, eyes full of regret, say something that would make her feel like she mattered again. But now, she didn't want that anymore. If he came crawling back, she might not even open the door. And that truth both shocked and freed her. Barbara texted often. Mac too. At first, his messages were simple check-ins. Friendly, casual. Then came shared memes. Inside jokes, things that made her laugh under her breath while shelving books or sipping tea. One afternoon, he asked if she wanted to go see a movie. Just friends. No pressure. She hesitated for a moment, but she said yes. They met at a tiny theater that played old films and smelled like popcorn and dust. He greeted her with a grin and 2 tickets already in hand. Romance or murder mystery? He asked. Kathleen smirked. Please, murder all day. They sat side by side. their arms brushing now and then. They didn't talk much during the movie, but there were quiet laughs, soft glances, the kind of comfort that didn't ask for anything in return. And when they left the theater, neither of them rushed away. They stood under the flickering marquee, neither ready to go back to their own lives just yet. "I'm glad you came," Max said, his voice low. She looked at him, studied his face in the glow of the streetlights. "Me too." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't push, and she didn't invite. They just said goodnight, and he walked her back to the motel. Inside, Kathleen sat on the edge of her bed and smiled. Something soft and real, and not tangled up in guilt or shame. She'd missed this. Connection without confusion. Time that didn't feel heavy. That night, she dreamed of the house she left behind. Not as a nightmare, but as a museum. Cold, clean, closed off. She walked through it in silence, looking at the pictures still hanging on the walls. Her smile in them didn't reach her eyes. Her arm linked with Douglas's, always at his side, never standing on her own. She walked out the front door in the dream and didn't look back. When she woke, she knew it was time to make it official. Not just the leaving, but the letting go. The next day, she drafted a short email to Douglas. No emotion, no drama. Just a line that said, "I won't be coming back. Please consider this the end of our relationship. I've taken what I needed. You can keep the rest." She stared at it for a long time before pressing send. Her heart didn't race. Her palms didn't sweat. She was ready. After work, she met Mac for coffee. They didn't talk about Douglas. They didn't need to. Instead, they talked about books, weird customers, favorite songs from when they were 12. It was easy, clean, uncomplicated. Kathleen didn't know if it would ever become more than that. And honestly, she didn't care. For once, she was okay being exactly where she was. Not someone's wife, not someone's emotional sponge, just Kathleen, and that right now was enough. Spring began to bloom quietly in the corners of the town. Tiny green shoots poked out from sidewalk cracks. The air felt a little warmer, and sunlight lingered a bit longer each evening. Kathleen noticed it all now. The changes, the pace, the stillness. Life had slowed down since she left, but in the best way. Everything was intentional, nothing rushed. On a Wednesday afternoon, Helen handed her an envelope at the bookstore. "This came for you," she said, puzzled. No return address. Kathleen took it slowly, her stomach tensing just a little. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Douglas's, clean and sharp. She opened it while standing behind the counter. No flowers, no dramatic letter, just a single page, typed. "I don't understand why you had to leave like that, but I guess I never really tried to. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I won't bother you again." That was it. No apology, no responsibility. Just the final act of letting go, disguised as detachment. Kathleen folded the letter and dropped it into the trash beside her. That chapter had ended long before she walked out of the house. It had just taken her this long to admit it. That night, she met Barbara at a small bar with low lighting and a jukebox that only worked half the time. They drank cheap wine, laughed, too loud, and for a while, just existed like they used to in college, before men and mortgages, an emotional compromise. "You seem whole," Barbara said at one point, swirling her glass. "Like I'm sitting with the version of you I missed." Kathleen didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled and reached for another fry. After Barbara left, Kathleen stayed behind, nursing a soda and watching people come and go. Max showed up halfway through her drink, not by plan, but it didn't feel like coincidence either. "Small town," he said, sliding onto the stool beside her. Or maybe fate, she joked, sipping her drink. He looked at her, serious for a second. You don't talk about him much anymore. I don't think about him much anymore. That's a good sign. She nodded. It is. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever feel angry? Like, not just sad or relieved, but actually pissed that he took up so much of your life? Kathleen stared into her glass, her jaw tightening slightly. Yeah, more than I say out loud. Sometimes I think about all the times I bit my tongue just to avoid setting him off, or how many things I stopped doing because I didn't want him to make fun of me. I was so small for so long, Mac. I didn't even realize I was disappearing. Mac reached over, gently placing his hand over hers on the table. But you came back. She looked up at him. Yeah, I did. They sat like that for a while. Neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't heavy this time. It felt like space, permission. Later, when they walked outside together, the air was cool and soft, and the sky was painted with stars. He paused by her car. If this is too soon, just tell me to shut up. She tilted her head. But I think I'd regret not saying it. If the time comes that you're ready for something more, I'd want a chance. With you? Kathleen looked at him. Really looked at him. His voice didn't tremble. His eyes didn't beg. It wasn't a plea. It was an offering. Honest, gentle, free of pressure. She smiled softly. I'll keep that in mind. He smiled back and didn't try to kiss her or hold her or do anything that would make her feel boxed in. He just said goodnight and walked away, and Kathleen stood there, the wind in her hair, the smell of spring all around, and realized this is what it means to start over. Kathleen moved out of the motel on a Monday morning that smelled like sunlight and clean hope. She found a small studio apartment above a bakery, just a few blocks from the bookstore. The place was modest, wood floors, a single window that looked out onto a quiet alley, and the faint scent of cinnamon rolls drifting in every morning. But it was hers, every inch of it. No one to ask before hanging a picture. No one to criticize her music choices. No one to dim her light. Her first night. In the apartment, she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by half-open boxes and a pizza that was too big for one person. A lamp she'd found at a thrift store flickered softly beside her, and the silence of the room felt like a warm blanket instead of a punishment. She pulled out her journal and opened to a fresh page. Home is not the place you live. It's the place where you're not afraid to be exactly who you are. She let the pen rest, then just sat for a while, taking it all in. Mac came by the next day with a housewarming gift, a crooked plant in a cracked ceramic pot and a 6-pack of root beer. I don't know what your aesthetic is, he said, handing her the plant, but I figured slightly dying but trying matched the vibe. Kathleen laughed, accepting the gift. It's perfect. They sat on the floor again. Her couch hadn't arrived yet, and ate sandwiches while talking about everything except the past. No mention of Douglas. No rehashing of pain. Just books, music, strange customers, and the weirdness of growing into people they never planned on becoming. At one point, she caught him looking at her. Not with intensity, but with something quieter. Something like understanding. Are you happy? He asked gently. Kathleen paused, then nodded. I think I'm on my way there. He didn't push, just smiled, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a rhythm. She added more hours at the bookstore, started writing again, not just in her journal, but actual stories, pieces she'd long buried under dust and doubt. Helen let her create a little staff picks shelf. and when her selection sold, she felt something like pride bloom in her chest. Barbara visited often, always with wine and sharp gossip. "Your skin is glowing," she said one evening, squinting at Kathleen like she was suspicious. "Is that what single, free, emotionally liberated skin looks like?" Kathleen rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. One evening, as summer crept into Spring's Place, Mac invited her to an outdoor jazz festival on the edge of town. They sat on a blanket under soft golden lights, their shoulders brushing now and then, sharing popcorn and laughing at the awkward dancer in front of them. Halfway through the night, he turned to her. "Still just friends?" Kathleen looked at him, really looked, at the way he was patient with her, at how he never tried to fix her, just made space for her to find her own way. She nodded slowly. "For now," he smiled, not disappointed, just content. "For now works for me." When the final song played and the crowd began to scatter, Kathleen leaned her head on his shoulder, not as a promise, not as an answer, but as a moment, because sometimes healing wasn't loud. It wasn't a grand speech or a dramatic door slam. Sometimes it was soft, quiet, like breathing in a room where you were finally allowed to be real. And as she stood under the warm sky, the laughter fading, the stars beginning to show, Kathleen finally felt what she hadn't in years,